morning. Good morning. Why are you guys so bored? I thought everybody was excited to be here, then they see Minister Mantashe and they got all quiet. Minister Mantashe, they were all laughing and smiling, and then you walk into the room and they got quiet. I don't know what you did. But good morning. Cape Town, South Africa has always been the mother city, the welcoming home of the African energy industry. 2019 was the last time most of us gathered in any room to talk about the energy industry. 2020, we got hit by a pandemic that I don't think anybody in this room could have explained. 2021, we started having a comeback that meant so much, and so much that was going to happen for everyday people, everyday Africans. But 2021, discussions about the climate, a transition, well, I think a just transition, arose. The global community, global predictions have always said we need to keep our climate below 1.5 degrees centigrade. This city has meant so much for many who have considered Africa one of the most important places when we have to look at the future. I want to start by thanking the ministers and thanking Minister Mantashe for hosting Africa, for hosting the energy industry, for hosting the world in South Africa. Mr. Minister, we thank you. They said it was not possible. They said it's not possible in Africa. They said you cannot do this in Africa. They said we could not meet together. They said it was not the right time to meet together and talk about our issues as Africans, as an energy industry. I believe over the last 3 months, most of you have received the chamber in your offices, in your houses. Some kicked me out, but that's okay. But you gave us the strength to continue going, the strength to drive an Africa that no matter what we talk about this industry, at the end of the day, it's about people. And that's why we're hosting the Africa Energy Week in Cape Town, because it's about people. It's about those who no one thought there would be a comeback. No one thought they would recover. 1,465 COVID tests have been done between yesterday and today, 1,400 plus. That's a record number in this continent, especially in a post-COVID environment. We thank you, and we thank Africa, we thank the United States, we thank Europe, we thank Asia, and we thank everybody for being here. You should be proud of what you've done. Put your hands together for yourself. I mean, guys, think about it. Merkel sends Gunther Nuke. We got to, where's that lost German guy? Gunther, thank you for being here. We are going to have an energy transition. There is no question, but it has to be just. We are not going to be apologetic about that. It has to be inclusive. Everybody has to participate in it. A transition without Africa is not a transition. But this is no time for Africa to take a step back. This is no time for Africa to give in. This is no time for the energy industry to walk out and not be proud of what we do. Energy producers, most of the companies, they produce that energy that we need. They drive our environment. They drive our civilization. And they make us better and better every day. And we should never, ever apologize for being producers. Never, never apologize for producing energy, for driving human civilization, because when we do, we drive a new narrative that the child that I met in the Gambia that had no option of an education because they got to read at night with lanterns. That's why we say making energy poverty history. You cannot get to 2050. To get to 2050, you have to get through 2030. And we need to have energy access for all. And I don't care where you stand. If we cannot deal with the issues of 600 million people in our continent without access to electricity, 900 million without access to clean cooking, most of them women, how do we talk about a transition without dealing with these people? How do we talk about a transition without ensuring that during the COVID period, if we're going to use ventilators in a little hospital in Dakar, Senegal, and there are no lights, most people or that person would have to lose their life. That is not right. That is not right. So while some people believe that we need to give up our natural resources in order to make sure that some others are happy, we say at this time, Africa is going to be that voice of humanity, that conscience of humanity that says we need to be inclusive, everybody, and this time. And those who have used these resources, it is time for us to develop together. As we have various dialogues in Cape Town, whether we agree or disagree, I believe this is the time when we have to stand for that young man I met in Mozambique. I felt that the world was not being fair to them, and I felt that they want a job in the energy sector. This is the time when we have to look at small island communities, whether it is Cape Verde or you look at island communities around Mauritius, understand the struggles they have to deal with a potential climate crisis. But this is also the time when we have to look at the young men hoping that local content, it's not just going to be a talk of the ministers, but local content is going to be real, and we're going to drive that, and we're going to develop that. But also, we have to also take some responsibility. Responsibility among African companies. We need to do better, and we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to manage better, we need to create better, and we need to drive better. Minister Lima will tell you about him being a young man. The guy just turned 50, and he's talking about being a young man. Like, happy birthday, but you're 50. You're no longer young. So we're talking about the young guys, okay? But it's also important, as we go over the next 3 days, that we don't only enjoy Cape Town. I know the Americans are here because of the food. They don't have good food in the United States. They don't, okay? So I had to call the former Assistant Secretary for Natural Resources, Frank Fannin, and I think the only reason why he came was for the food, but we have something better in Cape Town. The wine is good, the people are friendly, but also it is a beautiful city. We are going to listen to amazing people who really have a very clear vision of what we should do and what we could be. Africa, we've said it a lot. Africa's time is now, but it's not enough. Our time to commit to Africa is now. A commitment to really resolving issues that nobody would do it for us. The divestment campaigns against fossil fuels are wrong. We at the Chamber, we don't believe this is the time to divest against fossil fuels. We don't believe this is the time to not invest in Mozambique. This is not the time to not invest in South Africa, in Senegal, in Gambia, in Congo. This is not the time to not invest in Libya. This is the time to invest in Libya. This is the time to invest in new offshore fields in Egypt. This is the time to invest in new offshore fields in Nigeria. They just passed the petroleum industry bill. We have to invest in Africa. We have to look at new states that are going to produce energy, like Namibia, that has been struggling and really pushing with great enabling environments, and really make this our cause that we really discuss and set up. So we must hold governments accountable. We must push these ministers. I don't want none of you sit here and be all polite to our leaders. You tell them what you need in order to make it successful. You tell them what you need in order to make you put your money. If you won't put your money to the country, give me your money, I'll take it. I don't have a problem collecting money. The last accusation I would get is that I refuse money. I don't refuse money. That's why we sold tickets $1 to $1,500. We collect everything. But it's time to really invest in Africa. And let's talk with our checkbooks. And why do I say that? We can finance our own transition. We can finance fossil fuels in Africa. You think about a time when Africa, we can create the funds. Just imagine if we do $1 per person. $1 per person. I'm not in favor of increasing taxes, but we need to start thinking how we're going to finance our own transition. This is no time for us to go out to Europe and America begging. But when they tell you, you need to give up your fossil fuels, somebody has to pay for it. We're not going to accept that young people have to pay for a transition that they did not cause. I want to thank you so much. Bringing to the stage is going to be somebody who has led Africa so much, has been able to gather all petroleum producers and really drive and really being a mentor to so many of us, works every day behind the scenes, but continues to really drive an African story. And that person is Dr. Omar Farouk, the Secretary General of the African Petroleum Producers Organization, APO. Dr. Farouk, thank you so much and welcome.
I think I can do without this. Our chief host and member of the APO Ministerial Council, Excellency Minister Gwede Mantashe, Excellencies Minister of APO and other ministers gathered here, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to stand on the protocols already established by my good friend and colleague, N.J. Ayuk, Chairman of the Africa Energy Chamber, an organization that has, in the relatively short period of its existence, demonstrated great leadership potential in the African energy sector. Let me also join him in welcoming you to the inaugural Africa Energy Week organized by the Africa Energy Chamber in partnership with the African Petroleum Producers Organization. As we gather in this beautiful city of Cape Town to discuss the future of the African energy industry in the light of the global energy transition, we in APO believe that Africa's position on fossil fuels should be appreciated from historical perspective. The adverse impacts of fossil fuel use on the atmosphere did not just come to light. As early as the beginning of the 1900s, Western scientists have sounded the alarm that emissions from fossil fuels were affecting the climate. But their concerns, informed by their scientific findings, were ignored, or in some cases, suppressed by the dense industrialized and industrializing nations who needed a lot of fossil fuel energy to consolidate their industrialization and economic and social development. A century later, when these countries had succeeded in raising the living standards of their own peoples, making the necessities of life, food, shelter, clothing, health, education, and leisure largely available to a vast majority of their peoples, and having weaned their economies from reliance on revenue from mass material production, which requires a lot of energy, to the manufacture of knowledge and artificial intelligence, at a time when the poorer countries of the world, especially on the African continent, are poised to also use energy to develop their own economies and their people, someone suddenly remembered that fossil fuels are dangerous to the environment and to humanity. These countries began to sponsor scientific studies to prove what they had known for over a century, but had deliberately decided to conceal them because it was not in their best interest to do so at that time. Today, the world, comprising the developed and underdeveloped, has been headed to accept to implement a quick transition from fossil fuels to renewable energies. All hands must be on deck to end the use of fossil fuels in the shortest possible time, we are commanded. Developing countries have been cajoled into accepting to implement measures to end fossil fuel use by, among others, promise for financial support from the developed countries to ameliorate the hardship envisaged from the implementation of the transition program, and also for adaptation from fossil fuel use to renewable energy. How much of those financial supports are free and how much are loans that will later become debt burdens are not clear. The danger is that those financial support may end up constituting huge burdens to some of our countries, especially the oil and gas producing countries. It is instructive, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that with 17% of the world's population, Africa's total contribution to greenhouse gases, the main culprit for climate change, is just about 3%. The financial support for mitigation and adaptation, which cannot even be guaranteed, cannot compensate for the near absence of liability of Africa to the climate change challenge. This therefore throws up the issue of the practicality of a wholesome embrace of energy transition by the continent, while turning its back on fossil fuels, which it has in huge abundance. While not denying the reality of a changing climate and Africa's infinitesimal contribution to this scenario, how realistic is the expectation that the continent, especially the oil and gas-rich countries, wholly abandons what it has in abundance and what has worked for it for what has not been tested? Why must Africa, especially the countries with abundant fossil fuel resources, totaling over 125 billion barrels and over 400 trillion cubic meters of natural gas, fail to make use of these resources, like today's developed world did, to develop their economies and improve the living standards of their people? Since the world seems to be united in tackling the menace of climate change, it's equally only fair that the world, especially the part with the necessary technology, works with the African continent, especially the oil and gas producers, to harness fossil fuels in the most sustainable manner, especially as it is a fact that technologies exist to make fossil fuel environmentally friendly. Doing this will reduce the pressure and frenzy of migration to renewable energies, which could have its own adverse implications for the future of the planet. If Africa and the poor countries of the developing world are to be carried along in the UN's quest for sustainable development and eradication of poverty, when these countries then these countries must not be compelled to embrace energy transition the way it is currently being pushed by the advanced economies of the world. That is the essence of the recognition by the Paris Agreement of the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. The way forward for Africa in the transition is to make the most of its existing and depletable energy resources while creating the required infrastructure for renewable energy. But here's the reality. International oil companies with the technical expertise to sustainably exploit Africa's fossil fuels and in an environment that is friendly are being compelled to exit the industry to embrace renewables. What this implies for the African continent is that it must develop new technologies, new strategies to ensure that it continues to benefit from its God-endowed resources, especially now that its partners are being forced by their various governments to abandon them. Luckily, having produced oil and gas for nearly a century, the continent has been able to develop some level of expertise in the industry, and with a little more push, should be able on its own to embrace the challenge of exploration, production, and processing. The continent, that is Africa, cannot afford to gamble with the lives of the hundreds of millions of its people currently living without access to modern energy. Abandoning fossil fuels at this time is tantamount to abandoning our guaranteed source of energy that is needed for the continent's development. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, with these remarks, I welcome you all to this important continental energy event. I thank you all.
I just had a little program update in order to ensure that the speakers work very well. We will have to mic the ministers and the keynote speakers, so we'll shift a little bit to listen to His Excellency Mohammed Sanusi Bakindo, who is currently at COP. He has pre-recorded remarks will be done right now, and we'll have the technical team mic the next speaker and the next set of speakers before they go. So, ladies and gentlemen, we would hear remarks from His Excellency Mohammed Sanusi Bakindo, and in the middle of that, we'll get Minister Mantashe, Mr. Nuke, and other ministers being mic'd up so they could be properly heard.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is a distinct honor and a great pleasure to address Africa Energy Week. I would like to congratulate and thank Africa Energy Chamber for organizing this event and bringing together stakeholders in the energy industry from across our great continent to discuss the pressing issues of our day. I would like to express my thanks and appreciation to Honorable Gwede Mantashe, South Africa's Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, His Excellency Dr. Demantino Pedro Azevedo, Angola's Minister of Mineral Resources and Petroleum and President of the OPEC Conference 2021, His Excellency Bruno Jean-Richard Etwa, Minister of Hydrocarbons of Congo, His Excellency Gabriel Baga Obiang Lima, Minister of Industry, Mines and Energy of Equatorial Guinea, and my dear brother, His Excellency Timi Silva, Minister of Petroleum Resources of Nigeria, all of whom work to ensure that Africa Energy Week takes place in Africa, in the great city of Cape Town. Africa must be the destination of Africa-related events. On behalf of OPEC, I thank all of you. I would like to also sincerely thank my dear comrade N.J. Ayuk, Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chamber, for his tireless work in making this event possible. African countries have historically assumed strong proactive leadership roles in OPEC. Angola currently holds the presidency of the OPEC conference and will be succeeded by Congo next year. In September of this year, we celebrated a monumental milestone, the golden anniversary of Nigeria joining OPEC in 1971. Recent years have seen an expansion of the African presence in our organization. Congo became a member country in 2018, Equatorial Guinea joined in 2017, and Gabon rejoined in 2016. This consolidates the incredibly positive, constructive, and fruitful roles played by Libya since it joined our organization in 1962, Algeria since 1969, and Nigeria since 1971, and Angola since 2006. Last year, to commemorate the 60th anniversary of its founding, OPEC prepared a book chronicling the organization's history. What is remarkable are the number of key events that took place in African cities. From the 9th meeting of the OPEC conference in Tripoli, Libya in 1965, critical meetings and conferences have been held in Algiers, including our first ever summit, Oran, Lagos, Abuja, Luanda, and Libreville. We hope this expands in the future. Indeed, the idea for our organization was conceived in Africa, specifically in Cairo, Egypt. It was at the Cairo Yacht Club in 1959 that the Gentleman's Agreement was forged, which paved the way for the establishment of OPEC in Baghdad in September 1960. Aside from the African countries who are OPEC members, 2 African countries have joined the historic Declaration of Cooperation between OPEC and 10 non-OPEC producing countries, namely Sudan and South Sudan. This enterprise, which began in 2016, involves OPEC working in concerted action with 10 non-OPEC countries towards sustainable stability in the oil market. The strong bonds between OPEC and Africa reflect the critical role that our continent will play in the future of the energy industry. This is one of the most prominent themes of OPEC's recently launched World Oil Outlook 2045. Our flagship publication presents OPEC's medium to long-term projections for the global economy, oil, and energy demand and other factors pertaining to the industry. The first thing to emphasize is that Africa has a young and vibrant population. The Middle East and African region is currently experiencing a swift rate of population growth. By 2045, it is forecast to be the leading region by overall population, adding 762 million people in the period 2020 to 2045. We foresee a bright future for Africa's oil industry with significant opportunities for growth. The continent is home to 5 of the top 30 oil-producing countries in the world and several top gas-producing nations. The world will continue to rely on Africa's precious resources in the long term in order to meet the rapidly rising global demand for oil and gas. In 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, Africa produced approximately 8.5 million barrels a day of oil, which is around 9% of the world output. The continent's proven oil reserves amounted to around 126 billion barrels at the end of 2019. Of this, Nigeria held the majority with an estimated 36.9 billion barrels, or 29% of the continent's total reserves. In terms of the downstream sector, last year's oil demand shock caused by the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in numerous refinery closures worldwide, and we will see additional closures in the coming years. Looking ahead, from 2021 to 2026, we expect to see around 6.9 million barrels a day of new refining capacity come online, mostly in the Middle East, Asia Pacific, and our own Africa. Africa's potential refining capacity is expected to start increasing in 2022 at just below 0.4 million barrels a day before reaching just above 1 million barrels a day in 2026. Many of these projects will involve petrochemical integration. Looking longer term to 2045, OPEC forecasts 14 million barrels a day of capacity additions, mostly in developing countries. In Africa, long-term demand growth will lead to an increase in refinery throughputs of almost 5 million barrels a day in 2045, up from 2.4 million barrels a day in 2019. Another important downstream factor has to do with global refinery utilization rates, which are forecast at a rate of 81% in 2024 and slightly lower by 2026, yet still higher when compared to 2019 levels. These rates are forecast in consideration of recovering demand, in addition to the realization of numerous closures triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. In the longer term, utilization rates are expected to drop to approximately 76% in 2045 as more capacity comes online and demand declines in developed regions. This, of course, will result in additional closures in order to maintain rates at sustainable levels. These overall positive developments in the African downstream will help increase local refined product output while reducing product imports from other regions. In terms of downstream investment, we estimate a total of roughly 1.5 trillion US dollars will be spent during the period 2021 to 2045. 450 billion US dollars of this will be invested in new refinery projects and expansions of the existing units. Most of these projects will be located in developing countries, including our home continent of Africa. Indeed, the importance of creating an investment-enabling environment is a further key conclusion from our World Oil Outlook 2021. Cumulative oil-related investment requirements amount to about 11.8 trillion US dollars in the 2021-2045 period. Of this, 80% or 9.2 trillion US dollars is in the upstream, with another 1.5 and 1.1 trillion US dollars needed in the downstream and midstream, respectively. Creating the stability in the oil market necessary to attract the required levels of investment has been one of the primary motivations behind OPEC's collaborative efforts with 10 non-OPEC countries under the Declaration of Cooperation umbrella. This pioneering framework for multilateral energy cooperation continues to contribute greatly to the post-pandemic economic recovery as a vital stabilizing force in the global oil industry. Indeed, the Declaration of Cooperation between OPEC and non-OPEC producing countries has enabled the oil industry to withstand and recover from both the severe oil market downturn of 2014-2016 and the unprecedented oil market contraction following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we cannot talk about Africa's energy future without discussing the twin challenges of sustainable development and climate change, two sides of the same coin. This event promotes the vision of making energy poverty history by 2030. OPEC wholeheartedly subscribes to this noble vision. As this event takes place in the homeland of the late great Nelson Mandela, I cannot help but recall the words of Madiba, who said, and I quote, "Overcoming poverty is not a task of charity. It is an act of justice. Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings," unquote. Access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy is a right for all, not a privilege of the few, as enshrined by the United Nations in Sustainable Goal number 7. The unfortunate reality for developing countries is that a staggering 759 million people worldwide did not have access to electricity in 2019, with around 79% of them located in Mother Africa. Moreover, there were roughly 2.6 billion people, or 34% of the global population, who did not have access to clean cooking fuels and technologies. And this includes a massive 70% of Africans who have no access, exposing them to high levels of household air pollution. The energy poverty numbers for our dear continent, Africa, are stark. And to add in one further number, Africa accounts for only around 3% of global emissions. These factors need to be carefully considered at the ongoing 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP26, currently taking place in Glasgow. One of the most eloquent articulations of the need for a just energy transition was penned by Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa in advance of the COP, it was heartening to read how aligned the views of Cyril Ramaphosa and OPEC are in this regard. As the President wrote, and I quote, "We must contend not only with these primary dangers of climate change, but also with potential economic and social damage should the global community fail to deal with the crisis in a way that works for developing as well as developed markets." President Ramaphosa also noted, "The only way for a transition to be successful is if there is broad commitment to a transition that is just, a journey to net zero that leaves no one behind." Unquote. Similarly, OPEC has argued for a transition that is broad and inclusive, equitable and fair, and reflects common but differentiated responsibility of all parties. President Ramaphosa also highlighted the need to capitalize on the advantages that many African countries have in the energy transition. And I quote, he said, "South Africa is endowed with abundant natural and mineral resources. These can be harnessed to build a new economy in such areas as renewable energy and green hydrogen," unquote. And this, I believe, applies to the entire continent of Africa. The President also spoke sagaciously about the issue of climate finance. South Africa's ambitions cannot be achieved without the more developed economies meeting promises they have made to provide financial assistance to developing economies in their energy transition. To be clear, this is not about charity. This is about fairness and mutual benefit. And this also applies to the entire continent of Africa. Well said, Mr. President. OPEC believes that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to addressing climate change. Different countries around the world have varying capabilities and diverse needs. Thus, reducing emissions should have multiple parts as set out by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and all of them should be regarded as potential options. As an industry, we must approach these critical issues together through dialogue and cooperation, ensuring that all voices are heard and all viewpoints are considered. The oil industry can play a role in working towards our common goals. It possesses resources and expertise that should be utilized in developing more efficient technologies, particularly within the sphere of carbon capture and sequestration technologies, CCUS. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the challenges of our age can often appear overwhelming. We will continue to wrestle with the long-term scars of the COVID-19 pandemic for many years, if not decades. And yet, despite this context, this event in this great country inspires hope and courage. In his autobiography, Madiba said, "Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. There were many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lays defeat and death," unquote. Let us seize the opportunities and confront the challenges of our age, inspired by the titans of African history and the spirit of the great people of this continent. I wish all of us a very successful Africa Energy Week.
I would like to invite the Executive Vice President of Energy Operations for Sasol, Mr. Bernard Klingenberg.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning, our Honourable Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Mr. Gwede Mantashe. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Before I begin, allow me to acknowledge and extend my warmest greetings to all dignitaries representing governments from various African countries, as well as the captains of industry representing global and regional companies across the African continent, and all the other participants joining this inaugural Africa Energy Week. Recent times have been and remain extraordinary. The world faces fundamental challenge related to COVID-19, underpinned by low to modest global economic growth and the need to tackle climate change in a sustainable way. Here in South Africa and Africa, these realities are as pronounced as anywhere else, which further underscores the need for us to redouble our efforts to work together to resuscitate the economy while developing a sustainable energy pathway, and at the same time being very cognizant of our socioeconomic realities as a developing country and as a continent. In addressing these challenges, we acknowledge that energy is the bedrock of a thriving society and a healthy economy. It's for this reason that we also believe that partnerships are required to ensure that we craft, plan, and achieve a just transition. It's against this backdrop, and on behalf of SASOL, that I'm honored to have been given the task of introducing today's keynote speaker. For those of us familiar with South Africa's energy and mineral resources sectors, this distinguished leader needs no introduction. He constantly reminds us of the critical need to ensure that our energy transition as a country and as a continent must be designed and undertaken in a responsible manner, notwithstanding the complexity of our macro context. At the same time, he's a steadfast supporter of partnerships and has consistently demonstrated an appreciation for the role of a conducive and enabling policy environment and how important that is in advancing South Africa's energy sector. The Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Mr. Gwede Samson Mantashe, was born on the 21st of June in 1955 in the village of Lower Kala, in the then Transkei, which is now part of the Eastern Province, here in South Africa. He cut his teeth in activism and politics when he joined the student Christian movement. He holds an undergraduate and honors degree in commerce from the University of South Africa, and then in 2008 he obtained a master's degree from the University of Witwatersrand, and recently attained an MBA from Mancosa. Through these academic achievements, he has demonstrated his commitment to lifelong learning. It is, however, Mr. Mantashe's experience as a mine worker that has defined the trajectory of his career and contributions to South Africa. In 1976, he joined the Western Deep Levels and moved in the same year to work at the Priska copper mines until 1982. It was while working at the Matla Colliery that Mr. Mantashe in 1982 co-founded the National Union of Mine Workers, NUM, which is today the largest affiliate of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, with a membership of more than 300,000 members. He served as the union's Witbank branch chairperson until 1984, and then moved on to hold several other positions, including those of regional secretary, national organizer, regional coordinator, and assistant general secretary. In 1996, he became the first trade unionist to be appointed to the board of directors of Samancor, a Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed company. It was during that period that he also had his first stint in government, where he was elected as a councillor in the Ekurhuleni municipality. 3 years later, at a National Union of Mine Workers Congress in 1998, he was appointed as the first worker general secretary. He relinquished this position in May 2006 and joined the Development Bank of Southern Africa as Executive Director and Chairperson of the Technical Working Group of the Joint Initiative for Priority Skills Acquisition. The following year, he was elected as Chairperson of the South African Communist Party and served as a member of the party's Central Committee. That same year, he became the Secretary General of the ruling African National Congress and was re-elected to this position in 2012. In 2017, at the ANC's 54th National Conference, Mr. Mantashe was elected the National Chairperson. Since his appointment as Minister of Mineral Resources in 2018, and then Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy in 2019, following an expansion of the ministry, Mr. Mantashe has been a key facilitator in some of Southern Africa's most significant energy sector achievements. Most recent among these is the publication of the amendments to the Schedule 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act to permit private electricity generators to build and commission plants up to 100 megawatts without the need for general license. These changes in legislation will help reduce the impact of power supply interruptions to business and the economy, serve to diversify the energy sector, and also advance security of supply. Our keynote speaker is the living expression of a person who was born to serve and is passionate about utilizing partnerships to promote business opportunities and multi-sector economic growth in South Africa. Here to deliver the official welcome address, please welcome the Honourable Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Mr. Gwede Mantashe.
Thank you, Program Director, organizers of this important event, Secretary of APO, Secretary General of APO, Secretary General of OPEC, ministers from various countries in the continent present here. We must all realize more and more that we belong together, heads and directors of companies, invited guests present here today. I'm sure you listen carefully to what sounded like an obituary. And the only thing that makes a difference is that it didn't end with, "May his soul rest in eternal peace." It is really a great honor and pleasure for me to welcome you to Cape Town, South Africa. And therefore, this important energy conference is important to all of us. It has often been said that in the past, we live in interesting times. Those in the know would be aware that the turn of the phrase, though it sounds very optimistic, in essence it spells disaster. No other time than today is our continent, Africa, confronted with the most daunting task. From early in the 2020, Africa and the world were confronted with a global pandemic, the COVID-19. For developing economies such as most of those of our countries, coupled with the common challenges, the devastation brought on by the pandemic has been untold. I can tell you that we've navigated that journey painfully as a country, and I would imagine that many of our countries, sister countries in the continent, experienced the same. The devastation by the pandemic has left a scar in our economies. As if to rub the salt into our wounds, the wealthy advanced economies elected to hold the vaccines. Hence, our president, His Excellency Ramaphosa, called it vaccine apartheid. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, as our economies make a slow recovery from the pandemic, the global imperative of climate change is thrust on us. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that our world, big and small countries alike, confront unpredictable and often unprecedented climate change that adversely impacts lives and livelihoods. It would be amiss of any one of us to ignore the geopolitical and technical environment in which the debate on climate change and just transition discourse occurs, because it is not just an innocent debate. It is a debate that is taking place within the geopolitical and technological environment in which we're all located in. Globally, one summit after another, certain industrialized countries refuse to jettison their use of fossil fuel. You know, though we are encouraged to stop using coal, we have noticed with interest the fact that when Britain, when China, when India, when Australia ran into energy crisis, they all appealed to coal generation to give them more energy. We noticed that, but when they talk to us, they say, stop using coal immediately. So that is the issue that we must discuss without fear. What had been repeated as global agreements lay hollow as these countries keep postponing the deadlines on when they will shut down their coal mines, oil and gas industries, respectively. On the other hand, there are emerging economies whose economic development appetite has driven them to invest more in fossil fuels, in particular coal. I can tell you that in South Africa, coal is a major contributor to our economy, to foreign earnings. It is quite important, but we're facing the untenable situation. All these countries are motivated by national interests. For industrial economies, it is to maintain the leadership in technology and more. For developing economies, theirs is to catch up with the rich ones. In Africa, I can say that safely, there's hardly a country that is having universal access to electricity. We always boast that we're one of those that are striving hard. We're at 87%, but that is not universal access to electricity. The sad reality of this situation is that there's been preoccupation with Africa, yet our Africa is the least polluter compared to other continents. This is a sign of encirclement. I'm using this term regularly of late because I see us being encircled by the rich countries where we are converted into conduits of ideas of developed economies. Our continent collectively and her individual countries is made to bear the brunt for heavy polluters. We are being pressured, even compelled, to move away from all forms of fossil fuels, including resources such as gas, which have been regarded as key resource for industrialization. Our view is that gas is going to be part of the transition in a big way. But we're told that any fossil fuel we must not touch. I think Africa must get together, and this conference gave us that opportunity to develop a strategy to deal with this reality. Africa must seize the moment. We must indeed position Africa oil and gas at the forefront of global energy growth. As the continent, we come from far on issues of oil and gas, of hydrocarbons, as they are collectively called. But back then, in the aftermath of oil crisis in the 1970s, The development of Africa was brought to its knees due to the high oil prices. After the creation of OPEC Fund for International Development in 1976 to assist developing countries with the challenge of the balance of payments, it was the African countries like Algeria, Nigeria, Gabon, and Libya who pioneered an African solidarity solution. These four countries spearheaded the resolve that 4% of their oil produce would be reserved to assist 9 oil-producing African countries with their balance of payment challenges. That is solidarity in the continent, and it is more urgent today than ever before. Today requires the resolve on solidarity that is as solid as this one. The creation of Africa Trade Area is such a promise, but one that will need to be fulfilled by all of us in solidarity. One of the things that we must actually keep our eye on is the state of intra-Africa trade. Why is it attractive for a country in the continent to import fossil fuel from everywhere else except from the continent? It's a debate that we must have, and actually, countries in the continent that produce oil and gas must impose their desire to trade with us in the continent and watch our response to it. As South Africa, we have a clear energy policy encompassing all sorts of energy. Our Integrated Resource Plan 2019, though it is accepting, committed to moving from high carbon emission to low carbon emissions, still dictate that the transition will require a combination of technologies, including, by the way, coal being a major player for a long time, and nuclear must be an issue that we should look into as a continent, because that plan projects energy infrastructure built towards the year 2030 and beyond. While we are committed to low carbon emissions and even net zero emissions, we do so with reality of energy that guarantee national economic growth, development, and industrialization. I always share a story with people that I'm from a province called the Eastern Cape in South Africa. There's a store that is very famous that through a traditional healer, we're told that to kill our cattle so that we can be more wealthier. We never became wealthier because we killed our cattle. And if we are told today to destroy what we have with the hope that the future will be brighter for us, then we're very cautious. We think that we move from what we know to the unknown. We navigate that transition pragmatically and systematically. We don't jump, we don't swing like a pendulum from one extreme to the other. In this context, all energy sources, concomitant technologies, and minerals for low carbon emissions and is complex sensitive to our development needs constitute the most appropriate agenda for a just energy transition. In our case, this debate should not further entrench the urban labor reserves that are the legacy of our past. Therefore, the present must not enslave us further. Now, my African brothers and sisters, let us confront our present challenges in a similar fearless way as evident in the formation of the African Petroleum Producing Association, later African Petroleum Producing Organization in 1987. All those are efforts of pulling our efforts together to overcome challenges that confront the continent. True solidarity between and among us as Africans will overcome. History beckons on us. It reaffirms that the development of Africa can at best be piloted by the continent itself. This is what other regions of the world do. In other words, let's make the formation of Africa Energy Investment Corporation as a finance arm or to raise capital for investment in oil and gas a reality. In other words, to be coerced, to take missteps, to look good and be praised, we must actually talk to our financial institutions. This thing of saying there's upright cut of financing coal and upright cut of financing fossil fuel is actually a mistake. We must be systematic. We must be systematic. We must have the continent in our plan and move the continent such that it must cease to be the last born of development in the world. We must move up with all the potential. We're not poor, but we take our wealth and raise somebody else and we remain poor. That is what we must change. It's a call for all of us to work hard. For example, the minerals of the future are in South Africa. We have a neighbor called Namibia here, our neighbor here to the west. You know, between us and Namibia, we have a rich deposit of rare earth elements. But we don't talk to one another. How best can we use that resource to actually capture the future of the world? As we seek to transition to net zero future, the continent should look into its role of mineral resources like platinum group metals, which is heavily deposited in South Africa, in Zimbabwe. Actually, if we would bring in Russia to the scene, there's no reason that we don't have a similar body like OPEC for platinum. But everything is now regulated such that you can't do that because it tampers with the interests of others. So my submission is that, therefore, platinum group metals, rare earth minerals, and many other abound in our countries. If you can look into what we have in South Africa, in Namibia, in Angola, in the DRC, you move on, you can see that Africa is actually self-sufficient, but it must be more innovative, it must believe in itself, it must have confidence in itself, it must have passion about its own development. If we don't have those, and therefore not take the initiative, everybody is going to take the initiative for us, and we're going to be the last born. The green hydrogen market presents a huge opportunity for Africa to position itself as a global competitor in future green energy markets. Countries such as South Africa and Zimbabwe possess global reserves of platinum, which can help the continent to spearhead fuel cells production. South Africa has, for the past 15 years, spearheaded the development of hydrogen and fuel cells technology through the Hydrogen South Africa Research, Development and Innovation Program, led by the Department of Science and Innovation. It is one example that demonstrates that as Africa, we can take charge of our energy development trajectory. But to be able to succeed, we must liberate ourselves from being encircled. It should not happen that we only do things when we are directed by developed economies. We're just a conduit of other people's ideas. We must develop our ideas, we must be original, we must be innovative, and we must have the commitment to develop this continent into a leading continent. South Africa is rich with coal. Other Africans are endowed with oil and gas. Africa must invest on research and development in the exploration of these resources towards clean environment. When I talk about carbon capture, storage and use, I've been shouted down everywhere, but I continue to insist. So there's no such a thing, there's no such thing, because people are directed outside of the continent to force us into committing suicide. And I'm saying we must resist any program that leads to Africa committing suicide. Therefore, our investment in this kind of research is not anti-renewables, as others have it. Developed nations must invest in our humble yet noble endeavors in these areas. Africa, like industrialized nations, requires the same cutting-edge technologies. The idea that development must take into perspective events across time on the history of pollution cannot be ignored and constitute a valid case for inquiry between developed and developing countries. Part of the challenges is the duality of oil and gas and how these interlink through comparative pricing. As a continent, we must continue to utilize the platforms of gas exporting countries forum and oil producing exporting countries to tackle oil and gas challenges going forward. Though some countries have indicated the intention to cease the financing of hydrocarbons, we must utilize what we have and collaborate with those still keen to operate in all the upstream, midstream, and downstream business chains of our sector. Now, as I conclude, I think I must share with you few examples of where Africa can cooperate. The first one is the example of mutual beneficial collaboration can be seen from South Africa regional gas project, which was supported by government of South Africa and Mozambique. In that project, Sasol developed a pipeline from Mozambique to the eastern, to Mpumalanga in South Africa, and they offloaded, and we shared 50% with him, 50% held by us and Mozambique, 50% held by Sasol. They offloaded 30%. We ran into all problems when we said we want to use our preemptive right to get that 30%, but we insisted. Today, South African government and Mozambican government control 80% of that pipeline. That is what we should be doing, because a state with capacity is a great facilitator for the private sector development. A weak state is an irritation to industrial development of the private sector. Therefore, we need a good state to facilitate growth of the private sector. The second example I want to share with you is our announced LNG complex in Kucha. We've issued the request for information. I want to appeal to investors to come to the fore when we request for proposals. Investors must come and invest in that complex, because it is a complex that will facilitate imports of gas to the country. And therefore, investors must appreciate that that is an opportunity, it's not that a mistake. The third one, and the last one, is that in Virginia Free State, we have a potential of liquid helium that will be fully demonstrated in February 2022, when the JC-listed company, Renegen Virginia Gas Project, achieves commercial operation. Those are opportunities that we're having, and investors must take the opportunity and invest in those projects. We want to cooperate with everybody in the continent. We'll have a number of discussions during this conference with all of you. We want to talk to you because we know that we belong together. Thank you very much. You are welcome. Feel free. Enjoy the rest of South African people. And I won't tell you other things. You will discover yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I feel sorry for anybody who is going to speak after you. But bringing on to the stage is the Honorable Mohammed Amin Adam. He is the Deputy Minister of Energy from Ghana. Excellency.
Excellencies, honorable ministers, captains
of Industry, distinguished invited guests, I bring you greetings from the President and people of Ghana, and to assure you that we will continue to support the African Energy Week, as it provides a unique platform for our common conversation as Africans for the benefit of our people. As we all know, Africa has been described as the last oil and gas frontier of the world. Many of our countries have just discovered hydrocarbons, showing great potential for the transformation of our economies. Particularly, Ghana and other new producers can show evidence of the impacts of petroleum revenues, job opportunities, and value addition to our economies. But the recent push for transition to cleaner energy is likely to change the structure of our energy industries and the promise of accelerated economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that the energy transition will be disruptive to the economies of African producers of crude oil, especially new producers like Ghana. The effects of the transition, ranging from revenue losses, underinvestment in hydrocarbons, and the huge cost of adjustment, what I call the transition curse, will ensure that Africa is left behind the rest of the world, as the least emitters will likely suffer the grave consequences of the global response. It is for this reason my President, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of Ghana, eloquently articulated in his speech at the COP26 in Glasgow, and I quote, "The Almighty has blessed our lands with abundant natural resources, and it would be wholly unfair for the world to demand that Africa abandons the exploitation of these same resources needed to finance her development and to help us cope better with the threat of climate change, at a time when many countries on the continent have only just discovered them." Ghana acknowledges the importance and effects of climate change and the urgent need to combat it. And we acknowledge equally the importance of protecting our development. We believe that a balance must be struck and maintained between our social, economic, and environmental imperatives, unquote. And so, ladies and gentlemen, to address the inequities in the global energy space, we call for a global compact on the energy transition, through which Africa's peculiar circumstances will be appropriately recognized and addressed. The compact, among others, should ensure that European banks and banks in the developed world in general vary financing policy in favor of oil and gas projects in Africa under a special dispensation and sanction waiver. A global banking accord should allow banks to continue funding African oil and gas projects where there is a proven budgetary dependence on oil revenues and projects continue to have transformative effects on host countries. This should also recognize the fact that African producers need to produce to meet higher demand for crude over the next 2 decades as production from non-African sources decline. And this is important so we can ensure global energy security. African producers must produce carbon credits, which will be bought by the developed world. The same African producers can divert a portion of the funding to develop high-integrity carbon credits through reforestation and carbon removals, effectively offsetting a portion of the hydrocarbons
they continue to produce. The developed world will continue to provide a market by buying these credits bundled with crude or gas production. Ladies and gentlemen, this is important because it provides a market-based solution rather than grants or bailouts. African natural gas must be given the status as transition fuel for a longer period to allow gas reserves to be used when displacing a more carbon-intense fossil fuel globally, such as coal, and or when used in production of blue hydrogen. Renewable energy deployment is an important step towards decarbonization, but potential failures of wind and weather may require competitive natural gas markets to stabilize global energy supply. The energy transition, as we have been told earlier, should not be divorced from the necessity for universal energy access. As we were told by earlier speakers, there are about 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa that have no access to electricity. And accelerated access should therefore be a priority for Africa, which largely depends on fuel or gas-fired plants. Africans also need significant funding to support the deployment of renewable energy so we can displace non-renewable biomass that we continue to burn. As current funding available through the African Development Bank is not adequate. Estimated funds required for investment in renewable energy is about $56 trillion according to Goldman Sachs. And Africa should be the ideal location for large-scale renewable projects where this money, if available, will be spent, given the high levels of radiation and untapped wind energy. Reduction in carbon-based energy consumption through energy efficiency should be promoted in Africa. And so most people are talking about introducing low-carbon technology, but we think that energy efficiency is also key so that we can efficiently use the available energy that we have, as that is key to reducing the amount of emissions that occur in our society. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my expectation that this conference will herald the African dream of combating energy poverty based on appropriate mix of energy sources that are not only clean, but also assure the level of energy intensity. And this is very important, ladies and gentlemen. We need the appropriate levels of energy intensity because this is required for industrial development and economic growth on our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for the opportunity.
The next speaker needs no introduction. I would caution any investor, if you find yourself in his office, he would ask you the toughest questions, and he would, if you give yourself 5 minutes, he will make the discussion very tough, but you will come out learning. I went to see him. I learned more. I called him up to join me on a webinar. He said yes. And wherever you said we have to serve, Tom Olwendo says, send me, I would serve. Honorable Minister from Namibia, Tom Olwendo, we welcome you, and please come to the stage.
Back home in Namibia, we say it's common sense to speak out with a mask when you are far away from everybody else. So I use common sense to take off my mask. And thank you very much, NJ, for introducing me. And I also thank our host, my brother, Honorable Mantashe. Honorable Mantashe, in the introduction, when you were being introduced, I learned one thing, that you were a mine worker, and I was sitting there thinking, I wonder whether it's a good thing now to have a mine worker, a former mine worker, to be the minister responsible for mineral resources. But I think when I have listened to what you said, I think it's a good idea that actually you are the minister responsible for mineral resources. But we thank you very much for welcoming us to Cape Town. And also want to thank the African Chambers, Energy Chamber, for your outstanding leadership in organizing this energy conference on the African continent. And I am making a point to say on the African continent because it's not uncommon for us as Africans to be invited to conferences on Africa, but somewhere else outside the continent. And therefore, it's really, very great for us to be here on the continent because we are discussing an issue that is for Africa, and we are doing it in South Africa, on the African continent. Now, ladies and gentlemen, across the continent and other developing regions, countries are confronting the same problem. And that problem is the energy crisis that is really spilling its havoc on economic, social, and also on political issues, as we all know. This problem continues to persist at a time when we are fighting a pandemic, and a time when the world is building public and also political will for the climate change actions. We just actually came back from the COP26 in Glasgow discussing climate change. And in traversing the issues brought about by this problem, the legacy energy crisis, Africa finds itself asking difficult but really relevant questions on how best to navigate all these issues and arrive safely on the other side of the equation. Africa's energy gap is huge. 1 in 3 Africans lack access to electricity. 1 in 3, and that translates into over 600 million people that lack energy. Accessibility challenges have been attributed to infrastructure deficit, the lack of critical investment in the energy sector, high risk or uncertain, sometimes regulatory environment that we as government are responsible for, and that deter the private sector participation in the sector, and also the lack of required knowledge and skills to expand the energy and power sectors. Now, to just give you some statistics which I have gathered from the Africa Energy Atlas, very, very interesting statistics. For example, it says that a kettle boiled twice a day by a family in the UK uses 5 times as much electricity as a Malian uses per year. Another one, 11 states in Africa still have populations where 90% do not have access to power, 90%. Sub-Saharan Africa, all 1 billion people consume less electricity than the 4.8 million people in the state of Alabama in the USA. It says a total in Africa, that our total installed power generation capacity is only 147 gigawatts as per the ARENA statistics. This is less than the amount of Belgium's total capacity and the equivalent of what China, within 12 months or 24 months, installed every year. 4 out of 5 of Africans, about 727 million, rely on solid biomass such as firewood and charcoal for cooking, which causes indoor pollution that kills about 600 people per year. The last one says, Sub-Saharan Africa has undiscovered but technically recoverable energy resources estimated about 115 billion barrels of oil and 21 trillion cubic meters of gas. These are huge resources that we are sitting on. Now, the Africa Energy Week 2021 comes at a time when radical and informed action is required in order to accelerate energy developments and electrify Africa. It also comes at a time when Africa is taking its seats at the global table and allowing itself to be a driver of its future. I am encouraged by the President of Ghana, as he was quoted by the Deputy Minister, in terms of what Africa needs to do for Africa. The 2021 summit has chosen to encapsulate the motto of making energy poverty history by 2030. This will require up to $20 billion of annual investment from 2021 to 2030. Through networking and facilitating deals and representing the first and only Africa-focused energy event to take place in Africa in 2021, this summit will therefore serve as a catalyst to help transform the African energy space and make this goal a reality. Another item that is on top of the agenda is, I think is actually spoken by many other speakers, is that of the renewable energy sector and the energy transition. With national electricity plans being implemented across the continent and the widespread redirecting towards renewable power generation alternatives, significant developments have emerged within the solar, wind, hydroelectric, and even green hydrogen industries. Notably, projects such as the Grand Inga hydroelectric expansion project in the DRC, the Noor Solar Complex in Morocco, and the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project in Kenya represent some of Africa's biggest renewable energy achievements and are significant contributors to alleviating energy poverty across the continent. At home in Namibia, the government has taken a conscious decision to make the country a global hub for green hydrogen. There is an increasing development market for green hydrogen that needs the creation of a healthy economic environment that will attract foreign direct investment into the space. Namibia's vast solar and wind energy resources provide a strong foundation for the development of green hydrogen hub in Southern Africa. And Honorable Mantashe, we will be sharing that green hydrogen with you. As you say, we are neighbors. Certainly, we're going to be sharing that green hydrogen with you. The government also needs to see domestic renewable energy generation and green hydrogen production as key vectors of national decarbonization and a great step in the energy transition conversation. Namibia is focused on developing regional partnerships that will help transform a potential surplus of solar and wind power into increased energy access in the region. While this is in the pipeline, the country's position is not to suffocate itself by cutting off potential oil and gas resources that could assist in solving our problem. A pragmatic approach in the energy transition conversation has guided the direction in which we are building our energy mix basket. In Namibia, like in many other African countries, the concerns are more with providing living wages and supplying basic necessities to the country's growing populations. I understand the importance of working towards renewables. I believe they are the future of the energy industry. But in addition, we should know that the global energy transition must be inclusive, it must be equitable, and it must be just. The Africa Energy Week 2021 is promoting the role of natural gas in Africa's energy transition, recognizing how gas-to-power developments can significantly increase energy access continent-wide. Representing an ideal transitional resource, with its lower greenhouse gas emission, natural gas also acts as a reliable and readily available power generation solution. Backed by major discoveries in Mozambique, in Ghana, Senegal, and Tanzania, Africa is indeed turning to natural gas to increase energy security and expand access. As it was said, Africa is only responsible for 3.2% of energy usage within the global context and only accounts for 3 to 4% of the world's carbon dioxide emission from energy and industrial sources. But what we suffer from as Africa, we suffer from energy poverty or the lack of access to modern energy services, despite the natural abundance of fossil fuels and renewable energy sources, as I've mentioned. And with the potential to generate up to 11,000 gigawatts of electricity, the continent has the means to utilize solar power, wind energy, natural gas, hydroelectricity, and fossil fuels, and eliminate energy poverty on the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, with the African's Continental Free Trade Agreement slowly coming online, the agreement offers valuable opportunities to expand regional trade and also enhance intra-African collaboration. Notably, in addition to the international exports, emerging natural gas and green hydrogen economies across the continent can redirect their attention to regional economies across the continent. As it was said by my brother Honorable Mantashe, to say we need to start trading renewable energy or any energy within the continent. Now, with a clear sense of the nature of energy poverty and the opportunities for improving energy access via different technologies and approaches, I would like us to consider and emphasize some points of discussion during this summit for the next 3 days. One, we need to start to talk about how do we leverage financing. Two, we need to make explicit plan for grid expansion and distributed energy integration. Three, let's talk about balancing different generation technologies and approaches to access. Four, let's support the whole distributed energy supply chain, not just upfront cost, but the whole chain. Five, placing efforts at electrification within broader development strategies. And lastly, let's talk about clear and specific pro-poor policies and strategies when talking about energy. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, driven by the continent's significant oil, gas, and renewable resource, and built against a backdrop of existing project successes, as I have mentioned, this summit aims to directly address African energy poverty by uniting stakeholders with common agenda and facilitating large-scale energy development and investment across the renewable and natural gas power generation sectors. What makes this an ideal energy event is its multi-sectoral approach that unites numerous players from across the entire energy value chain. So, distinguished industry delegates, conference participants, all the Pan-Africanists, the fair media, honorable ministers, NJ, and ladies and gentlemen, ours for the next 4 days is to consider an African-centric just transition in ending energy poverty on the continent. The Africa Energy Week has assembled and given us the platform where we can network, facilitate productive deals, attract critical foreign capital, and drive the African energy growth. Right now, we have the opportunity to incorporate the problem of the future in today's solution so that we protect the energy generation, the 70% of the people under the age of 30 who are going to feel the real impact of our decisions we are taking today. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning again and welcome to the inaugural Africa Energy Week 2021. And I thank you, Energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. To move along, you remember I told Minister Gabriel Lima that he is no longer the young minister. I think we have a younger minister. Excellency, you're still young. So if that makes you happy. I mean, come on, at 50, you still think you're young? His Excellency, the Minister of Port Kang Chol, the Minister of Petroleum from the Republic of South Sudan. He is the youngest African minister, but I don't think that his message is young, from the youngest nation. So we hope to hear from you. Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Well, somebody is claiming that title. I'm not sure whether it's true or not. And that is Sane. He's trying to say that he's the youngest. I may change my birth certificate anytime soon. It's a title that I love. Today morning, when I came here, I was asked to go and greet Minister Mantashe, and he looked at me and said, "You must be from South Sudan." I say, "Why?" He said, "Because of the height." And I say, "Well, that's true, but I may also be from Senegal." You know, the delegation that I came with, among the shortest. And at times I'm forced to ask some of them when we are walking together to say, how is air up there? Because I may not feel it the same way. And also the smallest inside. So you can see the tragedy, Mantashe. Well, Honorable Mantashe, Minister of Mineral Resources of the Republic of South Africa, Your Excellency, Dr. Umar Farouk, Secretary General of African Petroleum Producers Organization, fellow ministers and international government representatives, my brother and a friend, NJ Ayuk, Executive Chairman of African Energy Chamber, members of diplomatic corporations and non-governmental organizations, members of the civil society and the media, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Honorable Port Kang Chol, the Minister of Petroleum of the Republic of South Sudan, a country with some amazing facts, least known to most of us in this room. Facts such as the youngest nation in the world, and one of the least contributors to the global carbon emission due to our limited industrial activities. Yesterday, when we were at Oliver Tambo International Airport, somebody would come and say, "Where are you from?" Then we will say, "We are from South Sudan." And somebody will say, "Oh, from Sudan." Well, 10 years ago, we became an independent state and the youngest in the whole world. A title that we are proud of, and a title that we would want to maintain, not because we don't want others to be independent, but simply because we don't want you to go under the same circumstances that we have gone. Our people are very resilient, they manage it. You may not be the same as us. Second, the only oil-producing country currently in East Africa region and hold the 5th biggest proven oil reserve in the whole of Africa. Third, it holds the 2nd largest wildlife migration in Africa, second only to Kenya from June to December. And third, the only country in the world where the combined population of the cattle, sheep, and goats outnumber the entire human population of the country. And the only country in the world where fish in the rivers and Nile died of old age. So, Honorable Mantashe, I'm extending my invitation to yourself and the gentleman who did not want you to go last time. Please this time tell him you are going to South Sudan. We will get you Nile perch right from the Nile. Very fresh. We will bring it alive, and you will be the one to say, you now deal with it. And if it is because of COVID, the heat that we have will help take away COVID. These are interesting facts and potential that can easily be turned into lucrative business opportunity for all its stakeholders, and with a high probability of high returns of investment in the shortest time possible. Honorable Mantashe, the Minister of Mineral Resources of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. N.J. Ayuk, the Executive Chairman of African Energy Capital, and the Organizing Committee, thanks for the incredible reception and hospitality accorded to my delegation in my first ever visit to the great land of South Africa in my capacity as a Minister of Petroleum. I am honored to be given this chance to share a few words in this great forum, which has been designed for us as Africans to have an open discussion and join our efforts toward energy security and prosperity for our beloved continent, with aspiration of ending energy poverty by 2030. While taking into account the principles and guidelines agreed upon by world leaders during the recently concluded 26 Cooperation of Parties Forum, also known as COP26 in Scotland, I must say this. Listening to all the speakers, none of us is against renewable energy. But we are all saying, and we repeat ourselves, and I will repeat words which were said by my colleagues, that it must be inclusive, it must be equitable. We must all sit on a table and agree. South Sudan budget depends on oil by 98%. When somebody wake up in the morning and tell us you should not produce in the next 10 years, we don't look at the end of your sentence. What we take from you is basically that you are telling us that this woman who is going to give birth tomorrow to maybe future leader of South Sudan should not give birth in a hospital, because that's the only resource that we have at the moment. It basically means you are telling me that that child must also go and live as a refugee the same way I did. Something that we cannot swallow is so bitter. Many developed and developing countries which participated in COP26 conference committed to cut their carbon emission down to 0% and stop deforestation by 2030. We should be able to maintain an average temperature rise of up to 1.5 degrees Celsius. However, this could still have a significant impact on the annual GDP growth of most African countries. The developed countries effectively use and continue to use their natural resources to achieve their national development target, while the African continent remain poverty-ridden and continue to export raw materials while importing ready processed petroleum products for its domestic consumption. I must be forced to remind us of a quote from a man that most of my generation across the continent are happy to associate with and are happy to learn about. and that is Kwame Nkrumah. He said, Africa, our earth is rich, yet the product that come from above and below the soil continue to enrich not African predominantly, but groups and individuals who operate to Africa is impoverished men. I think this reminds us that we have the responsibility to come together and rethink our investment priorities and strategies. We, the leaders of the African continent, must have an achievable energy-driven national developmental agenda with a clear roadmap into achieving them, remain committed to those discipline, and learn from each other in our resources planning, extraction, and must invest in our young African men and women through capacity building, on-job training, and better allocation of funds into sectors that will bring a real change and make African continent energy poverty-free by 2030. Honorable Mantashe, your generation and generation before you have liberated Africa politically. I had the opportunity when you were the Secretary General of ANC in 2012 during the centenary celebration of the ANC, and I went to Bloemfontein, and I had attended a session where you were talking to young people. And one thing that I remember was that we must begin to think of tomorrow. Where will Africa be? Few of you are still with us, need to help us realize that. And that will only happen when our young people are empowered to do so. Your Excellencies, South Sudan is currently East Africa's only crude oil producing country. Our daily crude oil production was over 350,000 barrels per day before the Civil War. And the Civil War affected the production whereby 65% of some of the oil fields are inaccessible. However, the signing of the revitalized peace agreement in 2018 and the formation of the Transitional Government of National Unity have brought about a relative peace and has improved confidence level of our partners, namely Petronas of Malaysia, CNPC of China, ONGC of India in the petroleum value chain, into putting more than 80% of the initially inaccessible oil field bags to production. The country currently produces an average of 175,000 barrels of crude oil per day, with some challenges such as high water cuts and aging oil field facilities, sand production. These challenges are very low hanging fruits business opportunities for any interested investor with the right fits for the purpose engineering solution with a very high probability of return on investment in the shortest time possible. The government of the Republic of South Sudan will continue doing its utmost best in meeting the oil production adjustment target, ensuring conducive business environment, a friendly policy framework, while doing everything within powers to minimize severity of coronavirus pandemic on the national economy. These are priorities, and we remain committed and willing to collaborate and share our knowledge, lesson learned, and success stories with newcomers into petroleum value chain, such as Eastern neighbors in the Republic of Uganda, in the development of King's Fishes and Telinga projects, which is planned for the next 3 to 4 years for better regional integration and development to preserve interests of our industry and our country. The Republic of South Sudan is committed to work in partnership with all its stakeholders in the energy value chain to ensure market stability, safer and greener environment for the benefits of all its stakeholders, and we continue to uphold the OPEC and non-OPEC declaration of cooperation in a bid to accelerate the stabilization of global oil market to show solidarity with our producing partners, friends, and counterparts globally in the interest of producers, consumers, investors, and global economy at large. One may be forced to say, yes, we need transition, like I said earlier. Yes, we are committed to it, but if the basic reason is that it affects human life, if we are forced not to produce, those of us that have not produced what we have is the same death. And therefore, it is important that it is a process, it is inclusive, and it must be fair to all of us. The Ministry of Petroleum, as mandated by the laws of the Republic of South Sudan, has introduced and passed policies like the Human Resource Policy Manual and the Local Content Regulation. This is to look at how best we can help our local people. These policies are a guide to help booster and cement the working relation between the government, investors, employees, and all stakeholders in the petroleum value chain in the country. The Republic of South Sudan, through the Ministry of Petroleum, for the first time ever, launched its first oil licensing round, featuring 5 open blocks. And I'm advertising here for those who are interested. Featuring 5 open blocks on the 22nd of June 2021, and that invite experienced partners, investors, and operators to unlock South Sudan oil and gas acreage that remain 90% unexplored. The government of the Republic of South Sudan, represented by National Oil Company, Nile Petroleum Corporation, is partnering with South Africa Strategic Fuel Fund. And I hope today I will be meeting Minister Matashe and SFF, hoping that he will tell me to go back with them so that they start, because we can't wait to see them starting. For the key upstream investment in Block 2 and Block B3 from Atlas Oranto of Nigeria. The few blocks that we gave away, the only 2 that we managed to give away, we gave them to Africans. And I want to remind all of us, and those who are new, if you have not given yours, please put policies in place before you give away any block. This is based on our experience. For our people to benefit from what we have, please do that. We are people today who did not have the opportunity to colonize Africa. They have come to Africa in the name of infrastructure and energy. And what they are doing is not different from what we heard before the liberation of Africa. Your Excellencies, Republic of South Sudan hold critical investment opportunities in upstream, midstream, and downstream of petroleum sector, health, education, infrastructure, banking, power generation, technology, and renewable energy-related sector, hydrocarbon and solar system. And the government of South Sudan has continued to put in place the relevant framework, policies, guidelines, and management system that create conducive environment for all business owners as it embarked on a journey to recover the economy. My sincere hope is that all our discussion and contribution during this forum will provide new ideas and valuable inputs on how to improve the sector for the economic growth of all the stakeholders in Africa, while putting more efforts into preserving global ecosystem. I believe each one of us have been doing this without being reminded by COP26. The current economic crisis and global pandemic may provide a window of opportunity, an opportunity to rethink our investment strategies and priorities. In conclusion, the Republic of South Sudan is targeting increase of foreign direct investment, positioning private sector-led growth as the engine of sustainable economic development for the nation, and continue to uphold the OPEC and non-OPEC declaration of cooperation in a bid to accelerate the stabilization of global oil market, to show solidarity with oil-producing partners, friends, and counterparts globally, in the interest of producers, consumers, investors, and global economy at large. I must end by saying we are happy to be part of this gathering. And when we were coming, I went to our president and I told him, we have 2 invitations on the table. One to South Africa to attend Africa Energy Week, and the other one to Dubai. And without waiting to hear explanations from me, he said, listen, go to South Africa. If it is called Africa Oil Week, we are first and foremost Africans. Go and attend that, and my greetings to the people of South Africa, and my greetings to those who will be attending the conference. With this, I thank you so much. May God bless you, may God bless Africa, and may God bless South Sudan. Thank you so much.
Before some of you in the media start complaining, Honorable Mantashe might have to leave us in a few minutes for some engagement that had been previously scheduled. So when you see him leave, don't say some of the speakers spoke and he had to run away. So, because I know that's what you like to put in the press tomorrow, so let me preempt you before you come up. Bringing to the stage is somebody who, behind the scenes, supported the African continent when he was with the previous US administration, developed so much behind the scenes work. I think Minister Gabriel, who is here, and other OPEC ministers got to know him. He got to be their brother. He got to be somebody who would really ensure that no matter what the crisis was, we always kept a united front to help save the energy industry. I will bring to the stage the Honorable Frank Fannon, the former United States Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Resources.
Thank you, NJ, for that very warm introduction. It's great to be back here in Africa. It's a great event. And excellencies, distinguished guests, thought leaders, leaders in industry, it's an absolute delight to be here to speak with all of you today. This is an important conference, NJ. You've done a tremendous amount of work. Your team, and I think you've heard, and I've struck by sitting and listening to the other distinguished speakers speak up on the importance of doing this conference here, now. And I can't think of a more noble pursuit than your overall mission, which is the alleviation of energy poverty. Something that has been talked about for decades. I'm in Washington. I thought I'd be in Washington for 2 years. It's been more than 20. And every time Washington talks about, every World Bank meeting, twice a year, there's something to talk about energy poverty. The World Bank, the IFC, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the OECD, go on and on and on, to address energy poverty. And as others have so capably spoken passionately about the issue, this is where most of that occurs in the world. So it's of the utmost importance that Africa and the African Energy Chamber speaks to addressing the scourge of this continent here, and to address it yourselves. Why is this so important? Well, because energy isn't just BTUs or barrels. Energy is life. Energy is the engine for development, the engine for progress. It provides for self-determination. It provides for agency. It provides for sovereignty of nations. You all know this very well, that's why we're all here. Of course, there's another conference going on, and we spoke to that in the context of the United Nations climate meeting in Glasgow. And I've been struck by the conversation and how it's pivoted from the leaders' discussion, where really the focus was on leveling up levels of ambition, is what they talk about, how to reduce faster, how to exit fossil energy faster. And the discussion then has turned to a just transition. Now, what does that mean? Well, in the Western sense, in the United States, a just transition tends to mean to make people whole who are losing their jobs because they worked in one industry and now they have to find some means to pay them, or create another economic opportunity to hold them, to make them whole. That's what typically what a just transition refers to. Politically, it's how to ensure that a constituency doesn't get angry when they find out that they lose their job. But I was struck by also some of the speakers who spoke about it, a more expansive view of a just transition, something that I've been trying to speak to as well, and that's the concept of an inclusive transition. Now, what does that mean? An inclusive transition speaks not just to make someone whole, but to bring someone along the entire time. People who lack energy should be included to provide an economic future for them as well. If someone lacks a job or an economic opportunity, there's nothing to make them whole. If there's a child today, and we've heard some speakers talk about that, then what do they shift to in the future? And the demographic shifts of this continent are absolutely spectacular. By 2050, there's going to be more than 2.4 billion people living here. The population is going to more than double. And so we can't talk about this discussion of transition from just moving from one type of energy to a different type of energy when you're talking about a scaled issue of people that lack energy. They must be included in this. The fact is that this energy transition we're talking about isn't just one of a shift from energy types, from fossil energy to non-emitting sources, but a shift of energy demand centers. Europe and the United States, they're effectively at peak demand. Asia is going to dominate the future in terms of the global demand growth, and second will be Africa, this continent. So we must talk about this energy transition as the alleviation of energy poverty, but to be included in that. And the scale is increasing the overall base of energy for everyone. You know, NJ spoke about the financial pressures affecting investors. This is extremely real. It's real in the United States, and it's real here. I was struck last time I was in Africa when I served in the government. And I met with this minister, and we were having a dinner. And maybe we had too much wine. He was speaking very candidly. But he made a statement that has struck me, and I've repeated this line. He was speaking about the ESG-related pressures, environment, social governance pressures, that were curtailing investment in his country as he's trying to provide a future for his children, his grandchildren. And he said to me, speaking about you in the West, he said, your ESG pressures are, and all of that, it means that, and however well-intentioned it might be, but the result of that is that my people get to breathe clean air in the dark. It struck me. Powerful. Powerful statement. And he said it was provocative, but it was also true. So we have to include Africa in this transition. So, and how do we get that investment here to do just that? Well, countries must demonstrate and demand that they are leaders in governance standards and also safe and sustainable operations. We have to demonstrate how you're doing how you're creating the opportunity, but also requiring companies to uphold the strongest standards and in your own government to enforce those standards. The reality is that the world is going to need oil and gas for decades to come. Just consider the juxtaposition that we've seen play out on television from Glasgow, where you have an ongoing climate change meeting to address the climate crisis. On the one hand, calls to restrict financing of oil and gas. And on the other hand, the entirety of the US administration seems to be calling on OPEC to increase oil production. Now, I don't mean to pick on the US administration. One of the truisms of US politics is for the last 40 plus years, on both sides of the political aisle, presidents always call on OPEC to increase production when gasoline prices hit a certain point. It's just some of the foundational concepts of the politics of American pump prices. But what can we take from this seeming contradiction is that by positioning itself as the sustainable producer, African nations can attract the investment and produce the energy for the world, but also for Africa herself. Again, this is going to be one of the drivers of demand growth for the planet. This is particularly true when we come to natural gas. Natural gas, we used to talk about it as a bridge fuel. Well, the United States, I think it's important to remember, reduced its greenhouse gas emissions more and faster than any other country ever. And we did that through conversion to gas, large-scale adoption of gas. Africa's demand is certain. The economic opportunities are clear. Let's help transition, an inclusive transition that brings all of us along, especially Africa. And I'd like to just say, returning to the tagline, make energy poverty history. Brilliant bit of branding. Love it. But I'm interested in helping all of you make that tagline reality. Thank you.
Bringing to the stage, he is no stranger to the oil and gas industry. He was one of the actually the founder of the SNPC, but today he is the Minister of Hydrocarbons of the Republic of Congo. His Excellency Bruno Jean Richard Etour. Your Excellency.
Good morning, everyone. My staff, they have prepared a very good speech. I think they have wasted long hours, nights to do that. And I thank them for that. As far as we have at the end of the morning, a session dedicated to Congo-Brazzaville. I will keep this speech for that session. And now I would like to speak to you with my heart, without any paper. But before that, I have to explain to you my first issue. My first issue is that my official language is French. I don't want to speak in French, so you will have to find headphones, interpreters. So I will speak in English. I have no choice. One of my dreams is maybe one day we will have a conference in Africa with as a first language an African language. I really appreciate this Swahili. I don't know why. I feel it as a very nice language. Maybe because of the song by Miriam Makeba, when she said in the past, nakupenda, and everyone knows which nakupenda means. I feel it as the best language to say nakupenda, which means I love you, obviously. Why not one day a conference in Swahili in Africa? Why not one day in conference in Lingala? Why not one day in a conference in Wolof? And so and so. But for the time, today I have to deal with my English. I really want to thank our young brother, Ng Ayuk, the president of African Energy Chamber, for making this conference possible today. An African energy conference in Africa. That was the big explanation he gave to me to convince me to change all my plans and come here in Africa for this conference. And do the same thing for the other ministers. And I wrote a letter to all the companies working in Congo, and I said, I will be in Cape Town. I don't know what you will do, but I will be in Cape Town. And I really want to thank them because most, I can't say, all of the international oil companies working in my country are here in Cape Town. It's all the time an emotion to be here in South Africa, this very special country in Africa. Special for many things, and special because this country has the privilege of having one of the most famous, prestigious African leader of this time, Madiba Nelson Mandela. It's also an emotion because I think South Africa is doing a lot to show leadership for many things. And I would like to thank his president, my big brother, who is not there now, the Minister of Mineral Research and Energy, for hosting this conference here. And I'm sure that giving all facilities to NG and you and the Chamber to organize this very, very important conference. This conference is taking place at the right time. It's taking place when in Glasgow, maybe some decision is going to be taken with a big impact on our country. Some people are trying to say, it has been said by all the speakers here, we should stop investing in oil and gas and fossil fuels and industry, especially in Africa. This conference is taking place when the energy transition is maybe the biggest issue, the biggest topic the world is dealing with. This conference is taking place when the OPEC, and now OPEC, we have a monthly meeting with the non-OPEC countries, which is called OPEC+. And in a monthly basis, we're trying to manage the energy worldwide sector. And the Secretary General of OPEC, you have seen him, is from Africa. And in OPEC, really, in fact, today, you have more African countries than non-African countries. So this is the right time for African to talk about energy. This is the right time. Today, right now, I don't want to speak as really a Congolese minister. I would like to speak as an African, simply, a Pan-Africanist. I would like to speak as someone who coming from this very nice continent, and I really love Africa. I would like to speak, if my young brother allow me to do that before him, my young brother, my very excellent young brother coming from Equatorial Guinea, if he allows me to do that before him, I would like to speak also as coming from African producing country, oil producing country. And maybe if OPEC allows me to do that, I would like to speak as the incoming president of the conference of OPEC for the next year. I would like to speak also on behalf of the sub-region I'm coming from, which is the Central Africa sub-region. In fact, I would like really to speak on behalf of everyone except my country. Most of the time, Africa is presented when you watch TVs, when you go to conferences, when you read the press. Most of the time, Africa is presented like a problem. The big problem of this century is Africa. That's most of people used to say. You can call it by any word. Afro-pessimist or another one. That's the image which is given of Africa most of the time. But really, I think that this is not a reality. On scientific basis, it's not a reality. Very, very worldwide known economists like the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Gordon Brown, they say that probably the next leadership of the world economy will be Africa. He's not from Africa. So it's not true what TVs and media they used to say about Africa. And how can we be the future leader of the economy of the world? How can we develop our continent and be that leader for the world? And how can we be that without energy? How can we do that without energy? So it doesn't make sense, even on a world interest basis, to require the Africa to stop developing all the type and kind of energy they have potentially on the continent. It doesn't make sense. Not only for Africa interest, but even for the world, it doesn't make sense. And especially why? We're talking about energy transition. Some of the speakers in Glasgow say that the solution, the only solution is renewable energy. But renewable energy, the most important potential in the world is where? Is in Africa. If you talk either on solar energy or hydrologic energy, hydropower, any kind of renewable energy, the most important potential is in Africa. Even if we put that idea and the solution as the only one, the solution cannot be found without Africa. and maybe we are the first one to bring the solution. The potential of solar energy in Africa, the potential of hydropower in Africa, I think now is developing at the rate, I don't have the figure now in mind, I think is less than 3%, which is used today. In my country is 3% of the hydropower potential which is used. And we know that DRC, they have a much more high potential of hydropower. You have the same one in Mozambique, you have the same one in Guinea, you have the same one in many, many other countries. I'm sure that the rate of the hydropower right now available is not more than 5%. I don't think so. And for solar energy, it's very difficult to have data. But it's probably worse than the situation of using hydropower. So even in that idea of having the renewable energy as the only one solution, Africa is probably one of the best areas for the solution. When you talk about the impact of the climate change, when we talk about low carbon, net zero target, now we're hearing many countries' voices saying net zero 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060. The technology is there, solutions are there. Many countries are doing something. I was in Saudi Arabia some days ago for the launching of Saudi Green Initiative to show that you can be a big oil player, you can be a big oil producing country, and in the same time you can be a leader for bringing the solution. And why not even put your country become a net zero country in 30 years? But in Africa, we have the second largest, most important forest basin, the most important place for the carbon sequestration natural way in the world. Once again, we are the solution. In fact, if we can bring scientists to make the calculation and data on how much carbon Africa is producing and how much we sequestering carbon, I don't think that the balance is not good in Africa. I think we have more than enough pollution of producing an oil and gas and coal without bringing the balance to be not good, to be negative in Africa. I think probably right now we are the best continent in terms of being not net zero, but more than net zero. So everything which is said about Africa for me is not true in a scientific basis. That's why I think today is the right time to say some things. It's the right time to really talk. The right time to bring the African voice at the highest level in Africa about that topics, that issues. I think it's the right time to take some initiative. As I said, I was in Saudi Arabia for launching the Saudi Green Initiative. My young brother, you have all the time so nice ideas, nice innovation, nice initiative. when do we launch? My French is coming back. When do we launch the Africa Green Initiative? Africa Green Initiative. Maybe we can add Africa Green Energy Initiative. I hope it will be the next step. Today, I don't want to say anything more than my brother Barkindo has already said. I don't want to say more than my brother Omar Farouk has said on behalf of APO, which headquarters are in Brazzaville. And we used to talk, and what he has said is exactly what we think. Today, my hope is that what my young brother, Gabriel Obianglima, is doing in Central Africa, bringing all the stakeholders to be together to talk about energy transition, bringing all the synergies and initiatives we can have in this part of Africa where almost all the countries are oil-producing countries. We're going to have a conference, a forum, at the end of the month in Brazzaville about that, on his initiative. I hope you will be able to come. Now we're sending an invitation to everyone. I hope this kind of initiative, we will have it in Central Africa now, and tomorrow in Western Africa, and after that in Eastern Africa, in Southern Africa, in North Africa. And by the way of this sub-regional initiative, we will have one message, not 5, not 2, not 3, one message from Africa about energy transition. We need to talk more. We need to meet more. We need to cooperate more. We need to cooperate in a better way. We have, I think, enough oil in Africa for African needs. We just need to talk together. We have enough gas for African needs. We just need to talk more together. We have many institutions. We need all those institutions to talk more together. We need neighboring countries, as the minister said, to talk more. It doesn't make sense to meet more often in international conferences, sometimes out of Africa, than we used to meet country by country. It doesn't make sense. It's time to change all those things, to have this one Africa voice, saying the same thing for these so important issues for our population. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
See, the minister played us. He said his English wasn't so good. Then he came out here and spoke so perfectly. We thank you, Minister. We thank you. Bringing to the stage is the other young minister who is competing for change of birth certificates. His Excellency Sani Mohamedou, Minister of Petroleum from the Republic of Niger. His Excellency has been a major supporter of this event. For the first time we talked, it wasn't even a question. He said, we are going to South Africa. We need to have an African conversation. We need to work together. And I think this generation of leadership has been inspiring for a lot of us to follow, and even gathered a lot of young people, some friends who cannot be here because of personal matters. But Your Excellency, we thank you for your steadfast support, and we welcome you to the stage.
Well, you know, sometimes winning the silver medal is even worse than winning bronze. I came this close to being the youngest. But I'm contesting the results. I need to see those birth certificates. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Since my predecessor has already spoken for all Africans, I think I'm going to go back to advertising. So I'm going to focus a bit more on Niger, I guess. Honorable Minister Montashe, Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, Your Excellency Dr. Farouk, Secretary General of APO, my brother NJ, Chairman of the African Energy Chamber, distinguished colleagues, guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to congratulate the African Energy Chamber for the perfect organization of this event here in Cape Town on African soil. I would also like to express my deep gratitude to all the guests who have honored with their presence this important event aimed at uniting all actors in the African energy sector in order to discuss how we can stimulate growth and development of our industry and promote the future of the African energy sector. Ladies and gentlemen, we come together at a decisive moment for our continent. Around the globe, as talks of climate change have emphasized the need for countries to reduce the environmental impact of oil and gas production, there has never been a better time for Africa to chart its own path. Our continent produces 6% of the world's natural gas and 9% of its oil. At the same time, we currently account for just 3% of global carbon emissions. Moreover, the continent possesses 7.5% and 7.1% of global oil and gas reserves, respectively. Thus, it is safe to say that Africa is the last energy frontier. Such vast potential cannot go unexploited. We need a just transition, it has been said before. We have an obligation towards future generations to exploit our resources and use the proceeds from oil and gas production to provide better access to healthcare, education, food to our people, and to fight energy poverty on the continent. My country, Niger, has significant natural resources. It is one of the largest producers of uranium. Niger has gold, iron, coal, and considerable energy potential, particularly in renewables. The oil industry plays a major role in Niger's economic development. By 2025, it will account for 25% of the country's GDP and close to 50% of all government revenues. In terms of potential, Niger has billions of barrels and billions of cubic meters of gas in proven reserves. And we are looking into developing all those resources. So clearly, Niger's future is linked to oil and gas. Despite the exploration activities undertaken since the 1960s, and which have intensified over the past 15 years, Niger's oil blocks remain largely unexplored. So that's an invitation for all of you to come get some oil blocks. Significant recoverable reserves were recently discovered by CNPC, by Savannah Energy, and by Sonatrach. Several oil fields in the Agadem area are in production, and a refinery with a capacity of 20,000 barrels per day has been operating since 2011, with half of its production exported to neighboring countries. Niger and CNPC are also building a 2,000-kilometer-long exports pipeline with a capacity of 150,000 barrels per day, going from Niger to the Benin coast. This project will certainly open up our oil potential. By 2023, Niger's oil production will increase to 110,000 barrels per day, with 90,000 barrels exported through the pipeline. Construction work on the pipeline began on July 5th and is progressing as scheduled. When it comes to electricity, the priority for all of us, I think, should be first and foremost to improve access. It has been said before, 600 million Africans currently live without electricity. In Niger, despite the great progress made over the past 10 years, only 20% of the population has access to electricity. Our goal is to achieve an 80% access rate by 2035. Niger intends to boost its electricity production by investing essentially in renewables and gas. Our objective is to go from being an electricity importing country to exporting electricity to neighboring countries. In order to do so, we intend on building strong partnerships with the private sector and to implement large-scale projects in solar, wind, hydroelectricity, gas, and even green hydrogen. Ladies and gentlemen, with all this potential, Niger invites you to support the development of its nascent oil and gas industry. Niger intends to play its part in helping Africa chart its own path. Our continent can emerge as the new global hub for energy. We can end energy poverty, but only if we work together, hand in hand. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention. Thank you for your kind attention.
We will continue going without a break. I know the folks from the media, some of them are complaining about not having access, but I think we were kind enough to let 135 different media organizations. So folks from the media, please be patient. The VIP guests, the ministers, they would all make time for you. We have about 6,700 people online watching this, so we have to give the ministers a chance to say it in their own words without you people in the media interrupting and saying something else. So whether it is Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or New York Times, and they even have Bild Zeitung from Germany. So you would have a chance. We have about 4 more speakers, and then you'll be free to, but please don't ambush the guests or the ministers. They would not really appreciate that. Coming to the stage is somebody who needs no introduction, somebody whom everybody calls dear brother, dear friend, the former young minister from Equatorial Guinea, His Excellency Gabriel Mbaga Obiang Lima.
You guys are making me feel very old, eh? First of all, I want to mention that I don't know if I will come next year. I used to be and have the pleasure to be the youngest minister. And I think it would be very difficult for me to bring my birth certificate and everybody believe that I'm the youngest one. So, but the key thing is I'm extremely happy to be here in Cape Town. First of all, to start, Excellency Minister, all protocol observed. I want to first say that it's a great pleasure to be at Cape Town, South Africa today. It has been more than 2 years. And I'll be very honest, I didn't just come for the conference. I'm expecting the wine and the cheese. So that's a part very important for me to be here. But the other key thing that I think is very important is that this is a great event that for me is very important. And I want to start first of all, and I appreciate if everybody will follow, to thank the organizers. Africa Energy Week, the African Chamber, NGA, all the team, for them to be able to organize this event and being able not just do it, but actually follow what some of the ministers have. So I would like to ask you if we can give a round of applause for their work. The other key things that I want to start is that a minister, a very dear minister, Minister Bruno Ita from Congo, have said some things that really have touched my heart. And I'm very serious about this because very few people know that when I started in oil and gas, even before coming to Cape Town for my first time for that event that it was done every year, he was the GMD of the National Oil Company in Congo. He came to Equatorial Guinea for one of the APO conference that we're there. And I swear, and I say, I like how he speak, I like how he lead his team, and one day I want to be like him. And for him, a person that has been very, very dear to me, to be here and congratulate for my work, I want to say that it's not my work. I just have been doing what you have been doing for many years, and I think Congo have done a right decision for you to be there and lead it Congo again, because Congo, it's a very important leading player of oil and gas in our region. Now, like the Minister Bruno said, I have my staff also, they prepare a very nice presentation. I was going to really bombard you with my ideas about how African I am, about all these issues, transition, the rest. But after listening to His Excellency, the Secretary General of APO, the Deputy Minister of Ghana, the Minister of Namibia, even the Minister of South Africa, Minister Bruno, I had been crossing all the topics. And I have to say, and even the young minister, South Sudan, Niger, they have crossed every single thing that I was going to say. Every single aspect that we as minister, we as captain of the industry, we had been saying to people. Unfortunately, it's not a conversation anymore. It's just screaming. they just scream to us. To be able to solve this matter and discuss this matter, we need to have a clear conversation, an adult conversation, for them to understand why we want to continue developing these resources. If they could listen to us the same way we listen to them about the climate, they will understand why we are doing that. Now, the only question that none of the ministers, and I was sweating heavily that nobody will say it, was a very single question. Why are we here? Why are we in Cape Town today? And I'm going to answer, and this is, again, very important question. We are still in the fourth wave of the COVID pandemic. We have so difficulties through airlines. We need to be poking our nose all the time with PCR tests. Everybody's checking everything. They have so many alcohol in the hand that one is very worried about what will happen. Right? But the answer is because we care. Because we care to be and being able to represent our country and also to be able to discuss about this matter that we have been able in doing it for all this period through the COVID pandemic. We care for our people. These are the people who have given us the responsibility to exploit efficiently our resources. We care for our country. These are the African countries that have been going through colonial time, neo-colonial, financial colonial, and we have not finished our development. Some of us, this is the first time that we are having highways, we're having buildings, we're having electricity. So our development have not finished. We are clearly, at the same time, care about our natural resources because everybody keeps saying the same thing. Africa is very rich. Everybody knows where the resources. Everybody knows our potential. But everybody knows that have not been developed. We also care about our continent and our future. And we keep saying all the time, it's our young people. Why do we send our children to school? Why we ask them to be educated? Because we wonder when they finish the university, they work. And how are we going to get those jobs? Developing our countries. This is why this is very important for us. And of course, we also care about Cape Town. We care about South Africa. Why? Because anybody who is in oil and gas in Africa knows, like Alain when I start coming to Cape Town, that there is an unofficial city that once a year we all come. And I can tell you right now the truth. We usually give the speeches. But the great thing about coming to Cape Town is that it's a unique place that as young ministers, I'm not young anymore, or new ministers, we can have dinners, we can have discussions, and we can actually ask at the next meeting, ministers, our issues. And those are the time, because these are the people who actually live with us, live in the same continent, and have the same problems. I cannot go to Houston or Dubai and talk with the Minister of Emirates and asking about my problem of electricity, because he will not understand. But a minister in Congo, in Gabon, Niger, will understand my problem, and he will advise me. Mr. Minister, do this, do this, do this. This is why Cape Town, South Africa, here in Africa was important. But the other clear reason that we care about Cape Town, it was a city that we consider our city. It's a city in Africa that a lot of the Europeans and people from the continent, they were amazed. There is a place in Africa that we can drink nice wine, do the cheese. It was not just the proud for South Africa. It was a proud for me to be an African and being able to say, yeah, in Africa we have those too. This is why Cape Town for us, it was and it is very important. We also care about our planet, about climate change. But also we recognize that our continent is the less polluter. So how can we have been asked to do more when we are the one actually doing less in that pollution? The ones who have been polluting are the ones who have to make the sacrifices, not us. They develop their country for their resources. So if they want a shared solution, stop using that resource and allow us to do it for them. We'll give them even good prices with discounts. We will do that for them. But clearly, the main reason why we are here and why we care is because this is an event, this is a city that as a minister of oil, as an African, we have a loud and clear voice, and we'll be able to discuss issues that next to all our ministers, issue about the IOCs, we'll be able to present again our voice. So for this, I want to ask you again, the same thing that I have asked for you to give a round of applause of the organizers. I think we all need to give a round of applause for all of you, directly or indirectly, who have decided to come all the way to Cape Town, being poked 1, 2, 3, 4 times in your nose for PCR, going through all the hassles for the traveling. For you to be here, you're sending a very strong message that our resources is protected, we have one single voice, and we're ready to defend our resources for the development of our people. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I will talk about Equatorial Guinea in my resource. Thank you.
I think Minister Gabriel, yes, he talked about the cheese, but he forgot to tell that they also come for Cubana. So a lot of people have been at Cubana already. I'm watching. Coming to the stage, he needs no introduction to Africa. His Excellency Gunther Nuke has been the voice of Germany in Africa. And, African leaders love Merkel. I think some of them crying that she's leaving. So you go to some African countries, they call Merkel Mutti. And I'm like, you speak German? They say no. But we have Muttis. When we reached out, Chancellor Merkel dedicated His Excellency Gunther Nuke, her personal representative, to Africa to be here and to speak to us. We welcome Your Excellency Gunther Nuke.
Yeah, thank you for this kind words. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished representatives of the business sector, ladies and gentlemen, my friend Andrzej. First of all, let me convey greetings of the German Federal Chancellor Angela Merkel to this conference. She is very interested in all climate change issues, but also very keen to understand Africa and to support Africa. Thank you for inviting me. I play the role of the green sheep in the flock of those knowing everything about crude oil and natural gas, and more importantly, knowing much more about Africa and its energy needs than I do. I'm going to speak about renewable energy. I hope you will allow this kind of response to the contributions of previous speakers, because we are living in the same world, affected by climate change and challenged by the need of carbon dioxide-free world in around about 2050. But I am also fully aware of opportunities linked with traditional businesses using fossil resources in our countries, in your countries, paying taxes for national budgets, and contributing to the well-being, hopefully, not only for the lucky few, but for the entire population. I agree that Europe is facing different challenges than the people in African countries. But our world is facing two essential challenges that it must solve by the middle of the century. The first global challenge is to ensure that the dramatically growing energy demand, especially electricity, is met, both in industrialized countries in Europe and in developing countries in Africa, or in an emerging economy like South Africa. The second global challenge is to reduce CO2 emissions. Here, the rapid transformation of the global energy, heat, and transport sectors is key to achieving climate neutrality in the middle of the century, as I mentioned before. I am convinced that these challenges can be met in a fruitful cooperation between the African and European continents, because common interests, interdependent tendencies are high. The well-being of Africa is in Europe's and Germany's interest. We do not fear those interdependencies. They commit us to each other with mutual trust. These notable include common interests in renewable energy expansion and in ambitious global green recovery narratives. At the same time, a number of critical challenges remain. With regard to financing, I share Chancellor Merkel's view that this is also about the credibility of the industrialized countries. To demonstrate Germany's commitment, we have joined others in supporting the phase-out of South Africa coal-fired power generation, as announced last week in Glasgow. In the future, the European Union will only be in a position to achieve its goals codified in the European Green Deal if it builds strong international partnerships that help to promote sustainable trade relations and green transitions globally. The comprehensive partnership between Europe and Africa would be decisive in this regard, but so far it consists of paper only. Real joint projects are still missing. For a CO2 neutral future, Europe will be largely dependent on the import of green hydrogen and its derivatives in the medium and long term. I would like to push the idea, already mentioned here, of mutual commitment and joint projects in the context of the INGA 3 or Grand INGA project in the DRC, which would tap into giant untapped hydropower resources in the Congo Basin region. Hydro is more suitable for hydrogen production because it is steadily available, not dependent from when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. The Congo forest basin represents 13% of the world's hydropower potential. The currently most cost-effective realization design envisages a potential of around 11,500 megawatts and would have among the lowest generation costs for electricity in a global comparison. However, the amount of electricity would by far exceed the current demand of the DRC or the region by far. Therefore, this would be no purchase contract which is essential for a bankable project. This would change if there were demand and guaranteed purchase conditions by hydrogen in the European Union. This, in turn, would guarantee the purchase of a certain amount of electricity from Inga 3 and make this investment of Inga 3 and hydrogen production in the DRC more bankable on the market. Inga 3 is a run-off river power plant without large dams and reservoirs, to be implemented in a socially and ecologically very responsible manner, and would be enough to supply the entire German steel industry with green hydrogen. Such a change towards green energy comes with significant economic cost and requires additional private capital. It is evident that only if the spot opportunities, and take them now, we will be able to achieve a successful global energy transition towards a green energy-based economy. At best, the result will be sustainable climate action and an economic win-win situation for Europe and its African partners, countries alike. Inga 3 plus hydrogen production would be the Power-to-X flagship project between Africa and the European Union. This could turn development policy towards economic growth. As mentioned above, the mutual commitments would like the implementation of the German and European hydrogen strategy with Africa policy, climate and geopolitics. Inga 3 could be a starting point for the industrialization of the entire region in Central Africa. Inga 3 and the region around the Congo Delta, including Cabinda, Matadi, up to Kinshasa, has the potential to become the Shenzhen of Africa. Friends on Africa often said to me, we want to become like the China success story. We, the African Union, African countries like DRC and Angola, partners in Europe, and primarily the private sector, should think about those things, not only about oil and gas. I wish all of us a fruitful and exciting conference.
Someone just tweeted he got some nerves to come here and talk about green energy, but that's good. Thank you, Excellency. I think you and His Excellency Bruno Etour could have an amazing conversation about the African Green Energy Initiative. And I think bringing all forces together to have that dialogue and also have the way forward could be really good. And we really appreciate you being here, and we really appreciate you being open to find an all-inclusive dialogue for that. Bringing to the stage is a country that is no stranger to Africa. It's one of Africa's leading producers, one of OPEC's leading producers. I would like to, we all were very excited when he announced he is coming to Cape Town, South Africa. Even with the constraints, he did everything to be here. His Excellency Mohamed Aoun, the Minister of Petrol, of Oil and Gas of Libya. Excellency, please come to the stage.
Excellency, the Minister of Mantashe, Excellencies, the ministers, distinguished guests, it's a pleasure for me to represent the Government of National Unity of Libya in this interesting gathering. Libya is one of the leading oil countries in the world. The discovery of oil has taken place in the late 50s in the last century. We are continuing to produce, and we are continuing to be an active part of different organizations. Sorry, I have to have a special greetings for my colleague, Dr. Farouk, because we work together in two organizations internationally, in the Gas Exporting Countries Forum and the OPEC, so I have to have a special greetings for him. I met him for the last few years together. Excellencies, Libya has contributed to the oil production, and it has a vast resources. The proven reserves in the oil side is more than 48 billion barrels of crude oil, and the potential is more than that. On the gas side, we also enjoy more than 52 trillion cubic feet of gas. We have a network that works in Libya, and we have an undersea pipeline to Europe from Milleta in the west of Libya to Gela in Italy. So our network is there. We highly appreciate that if the African countries can come together to have a unified network of gas for the natural gas in the current times, and also to utilize it perhaps in the future for the green energy like the green hydrogen. I highly invite the African Union to work hard and to unitize our country, our continent. The wealth and resources that our continent has should be enough to let us live a decent and happy life for all of us. It is sad to see that in Africa, some of our colleagues in different countries are without electricity, even though the resources that we enjoy can be more than enough to put us in the advanced countries. I highly, again, appreciate and highly invite the African Union to work hard on this direction. With the introduction of the renewable energy and the pressure on us all to reduce the emissions, though we are not contributing much in the international community of the emissions, but with the direction of all the world to go to the renewable energies and to minimize the emissions and to go by 2050 to reduce the emissions perhaps to zero, it may be difficult to achieve that in my personal judgment, but since the whole world is going to this direction, we may as well take the lead. We still have a lot of untapped resources, especially in the oil and gas, be it in Libya or elsewhere. We have to work hard to utilize this wealth to develop our countries and to live a decent life for all of us. We in the Ministry of Oil and Gas in Libya started working hard on the renewable energy and on the green hydrogen, and we are proceeding with that. But at the same time, we still have about 40% of our country was not explored totally in the offshore and onshore. So we highly appreciate the coming back of the investors to invest in this side. Besides this, Libya has a vast amount of resources, be it gold, iron, cement raw material, glass, the renewable energy, tourists. So all these activities, our country is now stabilizing steadily, and we are proud that we are trying to get out of the difficult times that we ran through in the last 10 years, unfortunately. We are hoping highly to achieve the election on the 24th of December this year. That definitely will put us out of a lot of difficulties that we faced during the last 10 years. We can see that the government of national unity has encouraged the foreign investment. We do have a special authority for the investment, and we do have a very good law, number 9, 2010, that gives a lot of incentives to the foreign investments. So we highly appreciate the understanding of the international community in helping Libya to get out of the troubles and the difficulties. There has been, in the last few weeks, awards of contracts to build electricity power generations, roads, bridges. So we feel that we are getting to try to invite the foreign investment to invest in Libya. We do also have a shortage in the production of fuel for the internal consumption. So we also, the refining and petrochemical industry, we also are willing to see some foreign investment in this side. I don't like to take much of your time. I thank you very much for your understanding, and we wish our continent to get out of this situation that, I again repeat, it's sad to see that we still have some people without electricity and without decent life, and we hope that we all have to work hard in the continent and through the African Union to get our continent out of this difficult situation. May Allah bless us all. Thank you very much.
We're facing the last two. We have the only woman who is supposed to speak here. Unfortunately, we're going with alphabetical orders, and her name happens to be the last one with a Z. But before her, we would invite His Excellency Timipre Silva from Nigeria. Was scheduled to arrive 2 days ago, but he was sent on presidential duties, accompanying the head of state of Nigeria to Paris, and he has dedicated the governor of OPEC from Nigeria to address us. That would be Dr. Adedapo Odulaja.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I thank my friend NJ because he has already helped me to convey the profound apologies of my minister, His Excellency Timipre Silva, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources of Nigeria. He was really looking forward to being here, but unfortunately, as you said, there is another call for some higher duties, and he had to be there. So he has asked me to read his speech and his welcoming speech and other activities that we have on behalf of Nigeria to take place today. So I will not take much time. I will just read his speech to you, exactly the way he has penned them down. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, the good people of the Federation of Nigeria, of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Nigerian Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and its parastatals, I warmly welcome you all to this auspicious 2021 African Energy Week conference, holding here today in Cape Town, South Africa. Indeed, the time has come for Africa to redefine its energy industry priorities, as indicated by the theme of this important gathering. It is now or never. Any time later than this will be too late, and many may spell a doom for Africa's energy sufficiency if it is later than this. Energy sufficiency ensures energy security, which is very high priority goal for nations all over the globe. It is a well-known fact that no country can develop without sufficient energy. It is an indispensable ingredient for human development and socio-economic prosperity. This is why access to energy is a prominent part of the United Nations SDG that was adopted in 2015. In particular, SDG 7 focuses on access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable modern energy for all. It is a fundamental human right. As it is today, or as at today, energy poverty is still prevalent in the world, especially in Africa, where millions of people still live without electricity and without access to clean energy for cooking. A lot of statistics have been dished out today, and I will not take more of your time going into these statistics. But the fact is, energy poverty in any part of the globe in the 21st century is inhuman and an unacceptable injustice. Without solving the acute problem of energy poverty, our survival is at a risk, since the required economic growth, food security, and human health and education, among others, will not be achievable. Let us turn to the issue of CO2 emission and concerns about the climate change. Climate change is perhaps one of the greatest global challenges of all time, with its grievous impact on our well-being, and hence the need for every one of us to do all we can to mitigate these glaring risks of climate change. The implication is that the issues surrounding energy poverty, climate change, and sustainable development are not mutually exclusive. Consequently, the approaches to alienating them should not be separated in any way. All the issues must be considered in a collective manner. Attending to any of them singly Without consideration for the others, we only spell more doom. Climate change is definitely of great concern to everyone, but of equal concern is the issue of energy poverty. Both must be addressed in a sustainable manner. Energy transition has been described in many places as the solution to climate change. This has been described as transitioning to low CO2 emission energy sources and transitioning to renewables. Energy transition, it is, however, very, very misleading to translate or to equate energy transition to getting rid of fossil fuels. It is actually mischievous to give fossil fuel a bad name after most countries or many countries have ridden on the back of fossil fuel to bring about development socially and economically to their places. Energy transition is about providing clean energy and not about discriminating between energy sources. In the face of the current high level of energy poverty worldwide, especially in Africa, all energy sources will be required to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal of providing access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy for all. It is evident that this goal cannot be achieved by renewable energy sources alone. All available energy resources must be utilized. Let us get this clearly. The battle is not between climate change and energy poverty. It is not between fossil fuel and non-fossil fuel. Neither is it between the rich and the poor, or between the energy affluent and the energy poor. It is between a narrow and an all-encompassing approach to addressing the multifaceted problem. It is about creating a win-win situation, a win-win environment. It is about putting a human face into the actions and proposals that are being put forward. It is about fairness. An unfair world cannot be a peaceful world. All indications point to a grim energy poverty situation in Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, which is not given adequate consideration in the current handling of the climate issue. The current approach is capable of setting Africa's development back for years. And to be modest, all the gains that we have made in the recent years can be lost in just a few years down the line. It could make energy poverty worse, toward economic growth, and result in unprecedented social unrest. What are we saying here? What we have to do is deploy the appropriate technology. The solution is technology. One-size-fits-all solution will not work. That old slogan of Ford, that any customer can have any car painted in any color that he wants, as long as it is black, can no longer be tenable in this situation. All hands must be on deck, and all possible solutions must be sought, not just one or a narrow one. Fossil fuel used with appropriate technologies to strip them of CO2 should be a part of the solution to climate change. And that is what we are advocating in Africa. Otherwise, energy poverty will become more pronounced, and the gap between the rich and the poor countries will be widening more and more. And this will not be good for the whole world. The world has in its arsenal the expertise and technologies to make the proven, reliable fossil fuels clean, sustainable, and affordable energy sources at a fraction of the cost being expended on alternative energy sources. Natural gas, which many of the speakers have mentioned today, is already widely seen as a low carbon emitting energy source that could play a major role and a major part in the energy transition quest. It is well positioned to become the energy source or a clean energy source for the future for generating power worldwide. Hence, efforts should be geared towards making this a reliable and a reality by displaying or deploying available technologies like the CCUS that has been mentioned here to ensure that all these energy sources are clean. In particular, Africa's large gas reserve fit well within our push for industrial growth and the need for reliable and affordable electricity to propel the overdue growth in our economy. This is essential for Africa to succeed and eradicate poverty, not just energy poverty, but poverty in all possible ways. Africa needs affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy resources to achieve this. The only one currently on the table is natural gas. It should be noted, and this is very important, that economic poverty is mainly responsible for driving many young Africans to take untold risks to migrate to developed countries all over the world in an overwhelming and degrading manner. One of the major causes of socioeconomic poverty is energy poverty. A non-sustainable approach to climate change will only make things worse, especially concerning migration of young people from Africa to developed world. On this note, it is important for Africa to stand together to weather this climate change storm, while avoiding losing all recent gains in the quest to pull our vast population out of energy poverty and hence economic poverty. We need to collaborate and support one another. Without this, we will end up having all the junks dumped at our backyard and plunge deeper into poverty, whether it is energy poverty or it is economic poverty. We need to pool our financial resources together. We need to start looking inward to develop strategies. We need to start investing together for the purpose and to reduce dependence on foreign direct investments. If we are to succeed in eradicating energy poverty and economic poverty in our continent. The way forward to surviving this onslaught that will condemn Africa to perpetual energy and economic poverty is to consolidate our resources, develop cross-border infrastructure, and expand regional energy markets to guarantee long-term energy security for Africa and for Africans. In summary, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we are all here to find a lasting solution to Africa's double jeopardy of energy poverty and climate change. Two sides of the same coin, as we have heard today. I'm confident that we will make a substantial headway on these issues at this conference. At the end of this conference, we should have achieved more efficient, coherent, and coordinated activities towards boosting energy access and developing Africa's energy sector, plus accelerating progress in scaling up investments in Africa's energy industry through suitable dialogues and partnership with all that are concerned and all the stakeholders in this industry. To all the delegates and speakers at this conference, I expect free flow of information and frank exchanges of ideas which will be truly effective in enabling us to improve our knowledge and solve the energy poverty problem in Africa. Let me thank the organizers of this conference, the African Energy Chambers, and particularly the indefatigable Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chambers, N.J. Ayuk, for putting together this event, which aims at uniting African energy stakeholders, and for their foresight in ensuring that we discuss Africa's problems on African soil. This is truly a demonstration of African Energy Chamber's commitment to Africa and to African energy issues. Thank you very much, Ayub. With this, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish all of us a successful 2021 Africa Energy Week. Thank you.
We saved the best for the last, but before she comes on stage, I would like to talk to those rowdy guys in the back. May you please tone down your voices. George, I can see you. Abongwa, I need your voices down. All these important people didn't pay to hear you talking loud in the back. We would have the CEO of, I love her company name, Earth, Wind, and Power, the former minister from Norway, the Honorable Ingvild Smines Tibring. She comes last by alphabetical order, not because she's a woman. I don't want you guys in the press go out there saying they kept the woman for last. And, you know, it's good to tell all these guys first before they start writing things on and everything. But we want to really welcome you here on behalf of Africa, on behalf of the energy ministers, the energy industry, and we welcome you to the stage.
Thank you so much. Well, given my height, You might assume that I'm from Sudan, South Sudan or Senegal. I'm sorry, I have to get out of the closet and admit I'm not. But Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a real pleasure for me to address the African Energy Week 2021. When I left Norway for Cape Town Sunday morning, it was snowing heavily, and it looked like a Christmas card from the North Pole. But it was beautiful, but it was really, really cold. So it is indeed a pleasure having the possibility to spend some time in this beautiful part of the world and getting the warmth back before I'm going back on Thursday. Well, it's not only the climate that it's warm. Sitting here today, listening to the warmth, the humor, and how you express you all belonging to the same family, the African family, makes me want to be a part of that family as well. And I think I can be that just for these 3 days at least. Well, at first glance, the issues of climate change and the transition to a zero-carbon economy, wasted energy, and meeting the growing demand for power, especially for the power-intensive megatrends such as digitalizations, may seem at odds with each other. For example, a major contributor to the environmental impact of the oil and gas industry is excess energy, and especially through the flaring of gas. The scale of excess energy is truly staggering. The IEA estimates that approximately 30% of total global energy production was lost or wasted in 2021. While the World Bank estimates up to 150 billion cubic meters of gas is flared every day. To put this into perspective, the amount of flared gas generates enough power to more than the African continent's annual electricity consumption. At the same time, demand growth for electricity to power data center services, which are truly needed for the future growth of our economy, is expected to grow exponentially in the next few years. With some estimates, it will represent as much as 20% of global power use by 2025, up from the level of 1% in 2016. This example suggests that it's time for us to take a more holistic and horizontal approach across industries when assessing the best way to deal with the challenges we are facing, both commercially, environmentally, and not least, socially. Much of the focus these days is on mitigating the worst effect of the environment and the transition to low carbon and sustainable alternatives. Well, this approach, however, risks overlooking some crucial issues, such as ensuring a just transition also for countries in the developing world. For example, during this transition, all stakeholders are obliged to see to that investments are secured for the necessary infrastructure to provide power for the 60% of Africans who are currently without access to power. There is also an obligation to assure that the local populations will enjoy the consequent economic benefits of this shift. Improving the performance of the existing technologies and bringing new innovations to market will therefore be crucial to tackle these issues, not just from an environmental perspective, but also in conferring lasting economic benefits for innovative businesses and from the countries and communities in which they operate. Having spent many years as minister and deputy minister in the Norwegian government at the intersection of these issues, I have seen firsthand the need for solutions that can meet these challenges head-on. I believe that by deploying a holistic approach, harnessing technology, as well as innovative and agile initiatives and applications, we will secure commercial opportunities to bring down the emissions of oil and gas production and encourage investments into renewable infrastructure to support a fair and just transition to a net zero world for all, while at the same time utilizing all the power produced to contribute to a larger amount of power capacity to the benefit of the people of where it is produced. I do look forward to following the various topics, discussions, and possible solutions that will be discussed during these days. And thank you for all of you who has put in the tremendous effort to gather us all here today and in these days, in these challenging corona times, for an important conference, both for Africa and also for the rest of the world. Well, I was not the tallest, neither the youngest speaker in this session today, but I am the last. Thank you so much.